sammā-diṭṭhi right view. In our last episode, we followed meditation from the surface down into the depth. From the cortical thickening measured in MBSR studies. From the gamma waves recorded in Matthieu Ricard's brain. Down into what the Buddha described in the canon. The 4 jhanas, the progressive letting go of obstacles, the mind becoming concentrated, purified, luminous. And we ended with the sequence the Buddha laid out in MN 36. With that mind, gathered, still, unified, he directed awareness to insight, to the direct seeing that jhana makes possible. Tonight, what that seeing actually is. The Noble Eightfold Path lists right view first, sammā-diṭṭhi. Most people hearing this assume it means having the correct Buddhist beliefs, agreeing with the doctrine of not-self, accepting the 4 noble truths as propositions, getting your Buddhist philosophy straight before you begin the practice. The Buddha described something different, not a position to hold, a perception to develop. The difference, you might say, between knowing that the water is in the well because someone told you, because the doctrine asserts it, because you have learned to repeat the words, and standing at the edge of the well and seeing it, knowing for yourself. Not yet drinking, but no longer doubting that the water is there. A note before we begin. We will be using right view throughout, the standard English rendering of sammā-diṭṭhi. But hold that word view loosely. By the end of this episode, it will have changed meaning. It will mean less of what most people associate with the word, a held opinion, a settled position, an intellectual commitment, and more of something else, a way of seeing, a capacity, a skill, a perception, not a creed. There is a phrase the Buddha used again and again when his teaching landed in someone for the first time. He said it of Kondañña, the first of the 5 monks to understand the 4 noble truths, sitting in the deer park outside Varanasi. He said it of householders, of would-be assassins, of his own father, of Sariputta on hearing 4 lines from a wandering monk. In every case, the same words, the same formula, the same opening. A Dhamma eye opened, dustless, stainless, and what it saw was this: whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. That moment, that opening, is what the tradition has long understood as the first arrival on the path. The first time right view ceases to be a list of orientations one holds and becomes a seeing one does. The first time the map is no longer needed because the territory has come into view. Tonight we walk toward that moment. We will begin with the Buddha's own short definition of right view, a sentence so spare it can be easily missed. We will move to the structural pivot the canon makes between 2 kinds of right view, the kind you start with and the kind the path becomes. We will arrive at SN 5611, at Kondañña Dhamma eye-opening while the Buddha was still speaking, and we will close with the simile of the raft, the teaching that even right view in the end must be set down. Right view, the Buddha said, is the forerunner, the eye that watches every other factor of the path, the thing without which the rest cannot function, but it is not the destination, it is what makes possible the arrival. Chapter 1. The Buddha's own definition of right view is short, almost terse. It appears in SN 45:8. In the words Thanissaro Bhikkhu translates this way: and what, monks, is right view? Knowledge with regard to stress, knowledge with regard to the origination of stress, knowledge with regard to the stopping of stress, knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the stopping of stress. This, monks, is called right view. The same formula appears in MN 141, in DN 22, word for word, across the Nikayas. This is the definition. Notice what is not in it. No doctrine of not-self, no cosmology of rebirth, no list of metaphysical positions, no Buddhist creed. Just 4 objects of knowledge: stress, its arising, its ending, the way to its ending, the 4 noble truths, but not as propositions to assent to, as things to be known. The Pali word for that knowing is jnana, and jnana is not propositional. It is not the kind of knowing that lives in agreement, in memorized doctrine, in the ability to recite. The closer English word is direct cognition, or gnosis. The Buddha pairs jnana again and again with dasana, vision. Yathabhuta jnana dasana, knowledge and vision of things as they have come to be. That doubling is intentional. He is not asking for belief about how things are. He is pointing to a seeing. Right view, as the Buddha defined it, is meant to be of that kind. Knowledge, but the kind that sees. There is something else worth pausing on here, because it changes how the rest of this episode will land. You will have heard, if you have spent any time with Buddhist teaching, of the 3 characteristics of existence: impermanence, suffering, not self. They are the standard summary of what Buddhist insight is supposed to reveal. The 3 marks that everything conditioned bears. The Buddha never called them that. The translator Thanissaro Bhikkhu has noted this with some care. The word for characteristics is not the word the Buddha used. The word he used was sanya, perception, recognition. He spoke of the perception of inconstancy, the perception of stress, the perception of not self, and the distinction, Thanissaro insists, is not merely a matter of vocabulary. His own reading puts it this way: seeing these qualities as perceptions reminds you that they are not metaphysical statements about the ultimate nature of reality. They are labels, mental fabrications, applied strategically. They are something you do. A characteristic is something the world has. A perception is something you do. Let that distinction settle for a moment, because it changes what the practice of insight is, all the way down. If impermanence is a characteristic, then your job is to agree with it, to accept as a doctrinal matter that things do not last. You can hold that view firmly. You can even argue for it, and you can still cling to everything that arises and falls in your experience, while believing sincerely that you understand it is impermanent. If impermanence is a perception, your job is different. Your job is to apply it, to notice, in this breath, in this thought, in this feeling, the arising and the ceasing as they are happening. The perception is something you do, in a specific moment, to a specific object of experience. It is an action of the mind. And the action either dissolves the clinging that is happening, or it does not. The Buddha's teaching of inconstancy was never, on this reading, an ontological assertion that you were supposed to accept. It was an instruction about a kind of seeing, the kind that, applied at the right moment, in the right place, dissolves the clinging that keeps stress in motion. The same is true of not self. The same is true of every supposedly metaphysical claim in the early canon. They are perceptions to develop, not positions to hold. Right view, you might already begin to suspect, is going to follow the same pattern. In the discourse called the Great 40, MN 117, the Mahakatar Saka, the Buddha makes a structural pivot that is easy to miss in a first reading, but once seen, reorganizes everything. He says, in Thanasaro's rendering, "Right view, I tell you, is of two sorts. There is right view with effluence, siding with merit, resulting in acquisitions of becoming. There is right view that is noble, without effluence, transcendent, a factor of the path. Two kinds, not two levels of the same thing, two different things called by the same name. The first kind, right view with effluence, is a set of orientations about the world. The Buddha lists them one by one. There is what is given. There is what is offered. There is what is sacrificed. There are fruits and results of good and bad actions. There is this world and the next. There is mother and father. There are spontaneously reborn beings. There are contemplatives and Brahmins who, faring rightly and practicing rightly, proclaim this world and the next after having directly known and realized it for themselves. 7 items, a working picture of moral reality. This is the right view you can start the path with, before you can verify much of it directly, operating for the most part on a kind of working trust. Read in context, the list is not a metaphysical luxury. Thanissaro reads it as a point-by-point refutation of the materialism the Buddha was surrounded by, the teaching of a man named Ajita Kesakambalin, which appears in DN 2. Ajita taught that nothing you do has consequences beyond the body, that generosity has no fruit, that when the body dies, that is the end. The Buddha's list, item by item, says, no, your actions matter. Your moral context is real. The visible world is not the whole story. There are people who have seen further than you have, and what they report is to be taken seriously. This is right view as orientation, as starting posture, as the working hypothesis under which the practice can be undertaken. The second kind of right view is different in kind, not degree. The Buddha describes it this way: the discernment, the faculty of discernment, the strength of discernment, analysis of qualities as a factor for awakening, the path factor of right view in one, developing the noble path whose mind is noble, whose mind is without effluence, who is fully possessed of the noble path. Read that again, slowly. He is not naming a creed, he is naming a capacity in operation. Discernment as a faculty actually functioning. Analysis as an active factor of awakening, present in someone whose mind is trained. This is not right view as a thing one holds. It is right view as a thing one does. And then, in the same sutta, the Buddha says, right view is the forerunner. The forerunner, Pubbangama in the Pali, not the first item on a list, not first in time only, the eye that goes ahead of the others and watches them, the one factor without which the others cannot rightly function. He explains, one discerns wrong view as wrong view, and right view as right view. That discerning is right view. Right view watches right view. Right view watches every other factor of the path: right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, running and circling around them, as the sutta puts it. Not first in time, continuously operative. This is a stronger claim than it sounds. If right view is the forerunner, then it is what makes the rest of the path possible. Right effort, without right view, is just effort. And effort, without the right framework, can reinforce wrong patterns as easily as it dissolves them. Right mindfulness, without right view, is mindfulness. And mindfulness, without the right framework, can be deployed in service of almost any goal, including goals the Buddha would not have recognized as the path at all. The Eightfold Path is not 8 independent items. It is 8 items watched, organized, and held together by the first. A note of honesty here, because it matters for how much of this you can trace yourself in the texts. The tradition has, for a very long time, called these two kinds of right view mundane and supramundane, Lokiya and Lokuttara. You will find this terminology in nearly every Buddhist commentary and most Buddhist textbooks. It is useful, it is widely understood. It is not, however, the language of MN 117 itself. The sutta uses different terms, with effluence, without effluence, transcendent. The mundane, supramundane vocabulary comes from later hermeneutical works, the Pitakapadesa, the Netapakarana, the Abhidhamma tradition. The distinction the Buddha planted is canonical. The two-word summary the tradition uses for it is later. The seed is from the sutta, the terminology is from after. The reason to flag this is not pedantry. It is that an enormous amount of Buddhist teaching gets passed along, as if the Buddha himself organized things the way the later tradition organized them. He did not, always. And in this case, the distinction between starting right view and operative right view is more interesting than the labels, and worth tracking in the Buddha's own language. Thanissaro adds a further distinction, and is explicit that this third level is his own synthesis. He calls it final right view, the right view that turns on itself. His reasoning is this: if right view begins as an orientation, a set of working postures about karma, about consequence, about the moral weight of action, and then becomes a faculty in operation, an analysis actively underway in someone walking the path, what happens at the end? What happens when the path has done its work? Right view, he suggests, must finally apply its own perceptions to itself. The perception of inconstancy, the perception of stress, the perception of not self, applied not to other things, but to the path itself, to right view, to the raft one has been carrying. He grounds this in the simile of the raft from MN 22, which we will return to at the end of this episode. And he says with characteristic precision that this third level is nowhere named in the canon as such. It is the implication of reading several suttas together. It is the synthesis. He owns it as that. For now, hold this shape lightly. Right view with effluence, what you start with. Right view without effluence, what the path is when it is working. And, possibly, a third, the right view that finally sees through itself and is set down. That is the structure. The next question is what right view actually looks like when it becomes operative. When the second kind appears, when the Dhamma eye opens, for that we go to Varanasi, to the deer park at Isipatana, to the moment the Buddha set the wheel of Dhamma in motion, and to what happened in the perception of one of the 5 monks listening. Chapter 2. The scene is well known, even to people who do not know they know it. Outside the city of Varanasi, on the bank of the Ganges, there is a place called Isipatana, the resort of the seers. Within it, a deer park, and in that park, at a specific moment in human history, the Buddha gave the first formal teaching of his life. 5 monks were present, the same 5 who had practiced austerities with him for 6 years, and then left him weeks before, when he abandoned self-mortification and accepted milk rice from a village girl. They had considered him a failure, a man who had given up. He had walked back to them through summer heat. They had agreed among themselves not to rise when he arrived, not to greet him as a teacher. By the time he reached them, they had risen anyway. Something in his bearing had changed. What he taught them that evening is what the canon preserves as SN 5611. The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion of the wheel of Dhamma. He taught the middle way, the avoidance of indulgence on one side and self-torture on the other. He taught the four noble truths, and he taught each of those four truths through 3 levels of knowledge and 4 kinds of duty, 12 permutations, the full architecture of insight laid out for them like a map drawn for the first time. And while he was speaking, not after, but while, something happened in one of them. The text is very precise about this. Thanissaro renders it. Gratified, the group of 5 monks delighted in the Blessed One's words, and while this explanation was being given, there arose to Venerable Kondañña the dustless, stainless Dhamma I. While the explanation was being given, not at the end, not when Kondañña went off and meditated on it, during, the listening became the seeing. This is a small point, but it changes the picture of how insight is supposed to arise. There is a model, popular in much modern Buddhist instruction, that says, first you learn the doctrine, then you go off to your cushion, then you meditate, then perhaps, eventually, insight arises. The text here does not describe that. The text describes a Dhamma eye opening in the middle of a teaching, as the teaching is unfolding. The conditions for that opening are doubtless particular. 6 years of austerity, present concentration, the specific quality of mind these 5 had brought to the deer park. But the opening itself was not a separate event. It was the listening reaching the place the listening had been pointed at. And what the Dhamma eye saw was a single line. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. In the Pali, Yam kinchi samudaya dhammam sabam tam nirodha dhammam. Pause on this, because the translation matters more than it may seem at first. The popular reading of this line is something like, everything that arises passes away. This is a perfectly serviceable Buddhist platitude. It points at impermanence. It is the kind of line you can find on a wall calendar. But Thanissaro is careful about it, and the care is worth following. The Pali does not say everything that arises. It says samudaya dhammam, whatever is subject to origination. And samudaya is a specific word. It is the same word that appears in the second noble truth, the truth of the arising of dukkha. The arising not as a neutral happening, but as a caused event, as something fed by craving. Origination, in this context, is a causal term. It is what arises because of a cause, and particularly a cause in the mind. So, the line is not a metaphysical aphorism about impermanence in general. It is a phenomenological seeing about causation. It is the second noble truth seen from inside, as it is occurring in one's own experience. It is the seeing that whatever is being fed by craving in this moment is, for that very reason, subject to ending. Stop feeding it, and it stops. The Dhamma eye is not a vision of impermanence as a cosmic law. It is the seeing of arising and ceasing as a causal process one is participating in. It is the moment one stops being subject to the process and begins to see it. That is the difference Thanissaro is trying to preserve. What the text describes next is, on its face, strange. And it is strange in a way that matters for how we read the rest. The earth devas, the sutta says, cried out. The cry went up through the heaven realms, through the 4 great kings, the 33, the realm of the Yama devas, the contented in Tusita, those delighting in creation, those wielding power over the creations of others, and on up into the realm of Brahma's retinue. In the Thanissaro rendering, so in that moment, that instant, the cry shot right up to the Brahma worlds. And this 10,000-fold cosmos shivered and quivered and quaked. while a great, measureless radiance appeared in the cosmos, surpassing the effulgence of the deities. Read that straight. The text does not explain it. It does not apologize for it. It does not offer the modern reader a frame within which to digest it. The cosmos responded to what happened in one man's perception. What you do with that is your own. There is a long tradition of reading these cosmic response passages as literary, as the canon signaling, through the only language it had, the magnitude of what had just occurred. There is another tradition of reading them as descriptive, as the canon reporting what was, in some sense, not reducible to physics, actually happening. The text is comfortable being read either way, because it makes no argument. It only describes. What is harder to escape is the magnitude marker. Something happened in the deer park that evening that the canon felt compelled to describe in cosmic terms. One man, listening to a teaching, came to see something. The text was not willing to leave that quiet. And the Buddha, the text continues, exclaimed. Then the Blessed One exclaimed, "So you really know, Kondañña? So you really know." The Pali doubles the line, Anyasi vatabho kondañño, Anyasi vatabho kondañño. The doubling has a specific rhythm, the rhythm of someone naming what they have just witnessed, as though saying it once would not be enough, as though the only adequate response is to say it twice. And from this moment, from this doubled phrase, Kondañña received a new name. He became, for the rest of the canon and the tradition, Anya Kondañña. Kondañña, who knows. That word, Anya, is worth pausing on. In Pali, it is not ordinary knowing. It is not the knowing of having read a book, or having memorized a list, or being able to recite a doctrine. Anya is the noun behind the verb the Buddha used, and it carries a specific meaning in the canonical vocabulary. It is the knowing of liberating gnosis, final knowledge. The kind that ends something, not the kind that accumulates something. This is the second time in this discussion that knowing has had to be carefully translated. The first was jnana, direct cognition. Now anya, liberating gnosis. The Buddha is using a vocabulary in which knowing is not what we usually mean by knowing. It is closer to what we mean by seeing, or by recognition that ends what was being held. And here we have to be careful in a different way. The texts do not quite say, this was right view becoming complete. What they say is that a Dhamma eye opened. Dhammakaku is the Pali, and Dhammakaku and sammā-diṭṭhi, Dhamma eye and right view, are different terms in the canon. They are not used interchangeably. There is no single sutta passage that says the opening of the Dhamma eye is the completion of right view. That equation is something the tradition has read out of the suttas taken together, and that careful translators, like Thanissaro, have read into the suttas taken together. It is a synthesis, but it is a defensible synthesis. Reading the canon as a whole, you can see why the tradition has made it. The moment the Dhamma eye opens, 3 fetters are cut. The first of those 3 is sakkaya-diṭṭhi, self-identification view. The second is doubt. The third is grasping at habits and practices as sufficient. The person in whom this happens is now described as diṭṭhi sampanna, consummate in view. The view words and the seeing words cluster around this moment in a way that has made the tradition's equation seem natural. So, when this teaching says, as it has and will, that this is what right view looks like when it becomes operative, when the second kind of right view, the kind that is a capacity in motion rather than an orientation held, finally appears, that is a reading the canon supports, but a reading. And what Kondañña gained in that moment was real, but not yet final. He was now consummate in view. The 3 lower fetters had fallen. He was bound for awakening within at most 7 lifetimes. But he was not yet liberated. The Buddha would have to teach again, 2 days later, the discourse on not self. SN 2259, the Anattalakkhana Sutta, to bring all 5 of these monks to arahantship. The Dhamma eye is not the final door, it is the first. This is worth holding clearly. The story tradition often collapses these 2 events, the Dhamma eye in the deer park and the full awakening that came 2 days later, into a single arrival. They are not the same. The first is what we are calling the becoming operative of right view. The second is what right view, having become operative, eventually accomplishes when it has done its full work. The first opens the path, the second completes it. Kondañña is, in the canon, the first. There is a sequel to this scene in a different sutta that is worth pausing on for its own sake. Some years after the deer park, a wanderer named Sariputta, who would become the Buddha's chief disciple in wisdom, was walking through Rajagaha when he encountered a monk named Assaji. Assaji had been one of the 5 at the deer park, one of Kondañña's companions. Sariputta, struck by the man's bearing, asked him, "Who is your teacher? What does he teach?" Assaji, being newly trained and shy of attempting a full doctrinal exposition, said he would offer only the essence. And he spoke a verse, 4 lines, which Thanissaro renders MV 123.5. Whatever phenomena arise from cause, their cause, and their cessation. Such is the teaching of the Tathagata, the great contemplative. On hearing those 4 lines, Sariputta's Dhamma eye opened, the same opening, the same formula in a slightly different verse form, the same arrival. He went immediately to his friend Moggallana and repeated the verse. Moggallana's Dhamma eye opened on hearing it. Later, when the 2 of them came to the Buddha is reported to have said of their experience, "Just this Dhamma, just this much, and you experience the sorrowless state, unseen, neglected, for many 10,000s of eons. Just this much." 4 lines in a marketplace from a monk who would never himself be famous. And what opened was the same eye, with the same formula that had opened for Kondañña in the deer park. This is one event named one way, occurring across an enormous range of human circumstances. The canon records the same opening for would-be assassins sent by Devadatta to kill the Buddha, for the householder Anathapindika on his first meeting, for Yasa, a young man fleeing a life of pleasure, for the Buddha's own father, Suddhodana, late in his life, farmers, murderers, householders, long-time ascetics. The formula is the same. The dustless, stainless eye opens to the same line. And the people in whom this happens are, in the canon's understanding, never quite the same again. There is one more observation to make before we move on. Notice what falls in this moment and what becomes operative. What falls is sammā-diṭṭhi, self-identification view. The view that somewhere among the things that arise and pass in experience, there is a self, that one of the aggregates, or the whole bundle of them, can be defined as I or mine. The Buddha will spell out in SN 2259 exactly why this view cannot stand once one has seen the rising and ceasing clearly. But the view has already cracked here in Kondañña. Once one has seen that whatever arises does so because of a cause, and that what is caused is, for that very reason, subject to cessation, the place to plant the flag of self begins to look like a fiction. What becomes operative and this is the structural mirror, is the seeing that makes the self flag impossible to plant. Not a counter-doctrine, not a positive claim that there is no self, a perception, a way of looking. The first wrong view to fall is the view of self-identification. The first right view to become operative is the seeing that makes that identification, in real time, impossible to sustain. The wrong view does not fall because someone argues it down. It falls because something else is being seen instead. The right view is not the conclusion of an argument. It is the seeing itself. And once that seeing is operative, the question becomes, what does it see, moment to moment, in the ordinary fabric of experience? What is right view actually doing in someone who is walking the path? That is the question Sariputta, of all people, takes up in the longest single discourse on right view in the canon. And that is where we go next. Chapter 3. The longest single treatment of right view in the canon is not given by the Buddha. It is given by Sariputta. The Buddha is not even present in the sutta. The setting is Savath, Jeta's grove, the monastery the merchant Anathapindika built for the Sangha. A group of monks have come to Sariputta with a question, and his response is what the canon preserves as MN9, the sammā-diṭṭhi Sutta, the discourse on right view, a note about MN9 before going into it. You will sometimes hear it called the definitive discourse on right view. This is conventional reverence, the way tradition has come to speak of it, given its length and its systematic exposition. The canon itself does not crown a winner. There is no passage in which the Buddha says, "This discourse is the one to study." MN9 is the longest, most varied exposition of right view that has come down to us. The tradition's high regard for it is well earned, but definitive is a word later readers added, not a status the canon assigned. What is striking about MN9 is Sariputta's framing question. He does not ask, "What is right view?" He asks, "In what way is a noble disciple one of right view? In what way is it recognizable in operation?" The shift is small but consequential. He is not looking for a definition. He is looking for the markers by which right view can be identified in someone who has it, the signs of the seeing in action. He then proceeds through 16 frames. 16. Each frame uses the same fourfold pattern: a phenomenon, its origination, its cessation, and the way leading to its cessation. The pattern of the Four Noble Truths applied as a method to one experience after another. The first frame is the unwholesome and the wholesome. The second is nutriment, the four kinds of feeding by which beings sustain themselves: physical food, contact, mental volition, and consciousness itself. The third is the Four Noble Truths themselves. And then, frames 4 through 15, Sariputta runs the same fourfold analysis through each of the 12 links of dependent co-arising: aging and death, birth, becoming, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the 6 sense bases, name and form, consciousness, fabrications. The 16th frame closes the loop: the effluence, with ignorance named as their origin. 16 complete cycles, same pattern in each. The thing, its origination, its cessation, the way to its cessation. 2 of the 16 are enough to show what Sariputta is doing. Take the first, the unwholesome and the wholesome. A noble disciple, Sariputta says, knows the unwholesome and knows its root. Greed, aversion, and delusion are the roots from which unwholesome action springs. The disciple knows the wholesome and knows its root. Non-greed, non-aversion, non-delusion are the roots from which wholesome action springs. When the disciple sees this, sees the roots, sees that wholesome and unwholesome arise from specific causes that can be cultivated or abandoned, then, the sutta says, he abandons the underlying tendency to lust, abolishes the underlying tendency to aversion, extirpates the underlying tendency to the view and conceit, I am, and by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge, he makes an end of suffering here and now. That refrain, here and now makes an end of suffering, closes each of the 16 frames. The fourfold pattern, applied to any one phenomenon, contains the full work of the path within it. Take the third frame, the Four Noble Truths themselves. The disciple knows stress, knows its origination, craving, knows its cessation, knows the way to its cessation, the Noble Eightfold Path. The same fourfold seeing, applied now to the central teaching itself. Thanissaro makes 3 observations about this discourse that are worth keeping. First, Sariputta's framing of right view through dependent co-arising, running the Four Truths analysis through every link in reverse, likely reflects his own awakening. The verse Assaji had spoken in the marketplace was about phenomena arising from cause. Sariputta, on hearing that one verse, saw the same pattern Sariputta now lays out in 16 forms. MN9 is, in a way, Sariputta showing the line of reasoning by which his own Dhamma eye opened. Second, Sariputta extends the analysis past ignorance to the effluence, to ignorance as itself the result of an outflow that feeds on ignorance. Ignorance breeds more ignorance. But the Four Truths analysis, applied at any single link, can break the chain. You do not need to grasp the entire cycle. You need to see the fourfold pattern operative in one place. Third, and this is the structural point that matters most, each frame is complete in itself. The whole is implicit in each paired relationship. Sariputta is not building a system in which all 16 pieces must be assembled before insight can occur. He is showing 16 places where the same seeing can land, 16 entry points. Any one of them, fully seen, is sufficient. This is right view, finally, as a skill. Thanissaro keeps returning to that word. Not creed, not doctrine, not even framework, exactly. Skill. A capacity to take any experience that presents itself, any feeling, any craving, any moment of clinging, any onset of aging, any contact, and apply the same fourfold question. What is arising here? What is feeding it? What would its cessation look like? What practice leads there? He writes in one of his early essays, right view, the proper focus and framework for understanding stress and its cessation, is one of these strategies. One of these strategies, a way of attending, a lens that can be brought to bear on whatever experience is in front of you in such a way that experience becomes investigable rather than simply suffered. MN9 is the picture of right view in motion. Sariputta showing the monks what it looks like, from the inside, to be one of right view, not what you believe, what you do, with whatever presence itself. Chapter 4. There is one simile left to bring in, the one the structure of this episode has been building toward. It is in MN22, the Alagadupama Sutta, the discourse on the water snake, and it is the simile of the raft. The Buddha is talking to monks about the proper relationship to the teaching itself. And he says, in Thanissaro's rendering, I have taught the Dhamma compared to a raft for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of holding on to. Understanding the Dhamma as taught compared to a raft, you should let go even of Dhammas, to say nothing of non-Dhammas. Let go even of Dhammas, the teachings themselves. To say nothing of non-Dhammas, the things that are not teaching at all and should obviously be set down. Even the raft you cross with. When the crossing is done, the raft is set down on the far shore. This is the line that grounds what Thanissaro called final right view. The level the canon does not name explicitly, but which can be read out of passages like this one. Right view as eventually self-transcending. Right view that, having done its work, sees its own conditioned nature and is, at last, released. But the same sutta contains another simile that must be heard alongside this one, or the raft simile becomes something it was not meant to be. It is the simile of the water snake which gives the discourse its title. The Buddha tells of a man who hunts a water snake and grasps it the wrong way, by the tail or the body, in such a way that the snake turns and bites him. To grasp the teaching wrongly, the Buddha says, is to be like that man. The teaching becomes harmful when held incorrectly, held as a position to argue from, held as something to be proud of, held as a possession of one's understanding. The raft is to be let go of, but it must first be held correctly, held as a raft, used as a raft, employed for the purpose of crossing. The Dhamma must be grasped properly before it can be set down properly. To let it go before having grasped it is not to have let it go. It is never to have picked it up. Right view follows this shape, held correctly across the crossing, used for what it is for, set down only when the far shore has been reached. So let me name what this episode has been arriving at. Right view is not the map. It is what happens when you stop confusing the map for the territory and start seeing the territory directly. The Buddha's short definition in SN 45.8 names the map, knowledge in terms of stress, its arising, its ending, the way to its ending. The Four Noble Truths as a frame, MN 117, names the two ways the map can be held, as orientation with effluence before the crossing has begun, or as capacity in operation without effluence as the path becomes itself. SN 5611 shows what it looks like when the map gives way to the territory, when the Dhamma eye opens, dustless and stainless, and what is seen is not a doctrine being confirmed, but a rising and cessation actually occurring. MN9 shows the map being used in 16 places by someone who has begun to cross. MN22 shows the map being set down at the end when the crossing is complete. The same event, in the canon, opening across an enormous range of human circumstance. The would-be assassin, the householder, the wandering ascetic, the Buddha's own father, the same dustless, stainless eye, the same single line. There is one image left. From SN 1268, the Kosambi-Goi Sutta, the well simile. The Buddha describes a man who comes to a well in the desert. He looks down into it. He can see with his own eyes that there is water there. He is not yet drunk from it. He has not yet touched the water with his body, but he is no longer in any doubt. He knows the water is there. He has seen it for himself. That seeing, the Buddha says, is the condition of someone in whom right view has become operative, not yet liberation, not yet the full release, but no longer doubt, no longer hearsay, no longer trust in another's report. The water has been seen. There is no longer any question of whether the well has water. This is what Kondañña received in the deer park. The water seen, not yet touched. The path opened, not yet walked to its end. He was, the canon says, gained a footing in the Dhamma, independent of others with regard to the teacher's message, crossed over and beyond doubt. He would still walk further, but he could no longer be swept away. That is right view, the seeing that ends doubt without ending the journey. We have walked in this episode the full arc of what right view is and is for. From the canonical short definition through the structural pivot of MN 117, through the moment of arrival in SN 5611, through Sariputta's exposition in MN 9, to the setting down of the raft in MN 22, and the seeing of the well in SN 1268. The thing that begins as orientation becomes a capacity in motion, sees what there is to be seen, and, in the end, is itself set down. But this seeing, the seeing of arising and cessation, the seeing of cause and what cause makes possible, occurs somewhere. It occurs in something the Buddha placed at the center of the entire path. He placed it there with great insistence, not in the past, not in the future, but in this place where mind is actually meeting experience. He placed it in the present moment, which raises a question modern physics has, in its own way, made strange. Because Einstein, working from the equations of relativity, came to a conclusion that has bothered philosophers and physicists for a century. The conclusion that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. That the present moment, in the framework of relativistic physics, may not be metaphysically special, that all moments may exist on equal footing in what physicists call the block universe. The Buddha's path is built on the present moment as the place where craving takes hold and where liberation becomes possible. Einstein's physics raises the possibility that the present moment may have no special status at all. These are not, it turns out, in conflict in the way they may first appear. But the path through that apparent conflict is worth walking carefully. Next time, The Meeting Point, Episode 7. Now.